Why do our emotions matter? And what are some ways that we can work with them so that we kind of don't get stuck and can move through painful or unpleasant emotions more healthfully or more constructively? So, today I'm going to talk a little bit about that cognitive behavioral therapy concept of where we have kind of a exchange between our feelings, our thoughts, our behaviors, and then the systems that are around us. And I'm just going to focus on how we can work with emotion. So, first, I want to say, like, why do we even have emotions? Well, emotions can be seen as a signal both to ourselves and to other people about how we are doing. And this signal is meant to drive action of some kind. And another way to think of this is, in a society, we want to be able to recognize if somebody is, angry or if they're frightened, so that we can then evaluate, what actions do we need to take here. And then the same kind of applies to us, right? If we're always cut off from our emotion, then we're missing out on a very important way of having knowledge about what we need and what actions we need to take. So I just wanted to start there because sometimes, in media, people kind of are very dismissive of emotion, almost as if like, well, what's the point? What does it matter? But I would say emotion actually does matter because we want to not omit important knowledge that could change what actions we take. Um, and yeah, so I'm going to start by going through a couple of ways that we can work with emotion. The first one is there are core emotions, and there's a neuroscientist called Panksepp, and they developed, along with Biven, a figure that shows the affective brain processing. And they identified these core affective, so this is like emotion circuits, and they are play, panic, fear, rage, care, lust, and seeking. And the seeking, I know that might sound vague, but the seeking is like the drive that we have to connect with other people, and to kind of seek that connection. So I wanted to start there because sometimes with emotions, there are so many different emotion words that we can get a little lost. So there are kind of these identified core emotions, and some people also identify the core emotions with like a wheel. Maybe you've seen this kind of wheel before, but it has like more simple emotions in the middle, such as like happy, sad, bad, excited. And then on the next tier, you'll see more specific emotions like agitated, rejected, excited, friendly, all kinds of things like that. And then even more specific, kind of like breaking things down to like ashamed or guilty. And the reason why I bring this up is because the more vocabulary we have around emotion, the more specific we can be when we're identifying and labeling emotion. And why would that matter? Well, I think that the act of being able to find the words for something can actually help us shift out of the emotion on a neurological level a little better. And I know this sounds silly, but they have done some research on the power of finding words for what we're experiencing and how that can help us begin to regulate. So, what we do is we start by identifying and labeling this, and we can use a feelings wheel if you just search feelings wheel or like an emotion intensity chart. They have these charts where it'll have like the category of the emotion and then how intense it is with the different words. So you can kind of pick based off of how intense they are. And then after we've identified it, what we want to do is we can work on identifying how intense this is to us. So if we're having like fear, joy, anger, disgust, sadness, these are some of the core ones that we have as well. The shame, seek, play, lust. Um, what we can do is on a 0 to 10 scale, or even on like a color scale or a pain faces. Like I know those pain faces that they usually have in like emergency rooms or doctor's offices. You can use any of those to kind of help scale the intensity of the emotion. And then what we can do next is identify what body sensation goes along with that. See if there's an image or a metaphor that kind of helps communicate what we're experiencing. And then what we can do too is we can identify what's happening in our environment. Is there an environmental component to this emotion? And sometimes in family systems, what we see is that one person tends to hold the anxiety for the rest of the system. So one person might be kind of minimizing what's happening, and then the other person is acting it out. This is like a systems theory. Um, but it can be helpful, right? Because if we take a moment to gauge, okay, what's going on in our environment? How is my emotion related to the people around me? It can help us identify our boundaries and also what actions we might need to take related to our emotion. For example, if we have, a loved one who is experiencing a lot of distress and that's impacting our emotion, the actions we take are going to look a little different versus if you're kind of by yourself and you're having an intense emotion that you want to shift. So, um, there are a couple of strategies that we can do after we've identified what's happening and we've taken a moment to reflect on it. I would say it's best if we can write this down while we're practicing, because actually putting pen to paper can help us begin to process it and also distance ourselves a little bit, right? I think it encourages us to get in that student mode or researcher mode versus being in like the emotion driven mode. So we're reflecting, right? We're kind of thinking like a detective. What is going on with me? What do I need to do next? And then what we can do is we can practice a couple of different strategies. So one is just simply by taking note of what we're experiencing and what we think might have caused it. Maybe we were a little vulnerable, right? Like perhaps we didn't sleep as well. Perhaps we skipped a meal. Perhaps, it was this big presentation at work, or maybe a kid was sick, something like that. These things can all make us more vulnerable to having these stuck emotions or intense, uncomfortable emotions. But the habit of tracking these emotions can also help us see if there's like a pattern, and help us identify too, like little vulnerabilities that we can start adjusting. So one approach that I really like is to think of emotion as being like a weather pattern. So, some days it's rainy, some days it's cloudy, it's sunny. And with the weather, usually we don't take it personally. We're not like, oh, I'm such a bad person, that's why it's raining. Or at least I hope that you don't do that, because then you wouldn't get to enjoy the rain. But I think that sometimes having a little bit of distance between us and our emotions can be useful, such as being like, wow, I noticed that I'm having a lot of sadness come up right now. What's bringing this sadness on? Why is it lingering, right? Almost like a rain cloud. What's going on with this rain cloud of sadness? What do I need to do right now to kind of recognize and honor that emotion? What do I need to do to just kind of let it pass? And sometimes just paying attention to it actually can help us get unstuck. Because I think a lot of what happens with symptoms is that a symptom of any kind or a very intense emotion is like a knock on the door, trying to get our attention to take some kind of action. So the second we start paying attention to it, and in a way of being like, huh, look, I see you, what's going on? That kind of way, not like a alarm or panic way, but just, okay, I'm recognizing what's happening. That can help drop down the intensity a little bit. So one is to have that kind of weather pattern idea of not taking it personally, not catastrophizing the emotion, meaning like, oh, just the fact that I feel like afraid right now means that something bad is going to happen. That's not necessarily the case. Our emotions are not facts in a way, right? They're just emotions. They are meaningful, but they have their limitations. Sometimes we might feel afraid for no discernible reason. It might just be that some fear came up, it was triggered by something not that important, and it's going to go away. Just like wind will kind of blow through and then it'll be gone. I don't think I've ever met anyone who has stayed stuck in an emotion for an extremely long period of time. Usually there's some ebb and flow involved. Just because as people, we are constantly in flux, right? Things change, we change. Another way to look at this is like this wave. So even with really uncomfortable emotions like rage, or like resentment, we'll usually notice they kind of build, and maybe they're getting fed by those vulnerabilities I talked about earlier, right? Like not being well rested, or maybe not taking medication that were prescribed or something else of that nature. The thing is, or being around people that are harmful to us. It's building, and we know that the emotion is going to at some point peak, and then it will continue to drop down, just like a wave at the beach, right? There's going to be a peak and then a ebb, an ebb and flow. And so sometimes having this metaphor of a wave cresting and then tapering down can be useful, because we can remind ourselves in the moment, like, this anger is not going to last forever. It's here, but it's going to start to drop. And even noticing yourself being like, is it building still? Or is it starting to drop down? Where am I in this cycle? In EMDR, there's a really great um, saying that we use, called an interweave. It's like something that you kind of weave into therapy as you're working on something. And it's, a tunnel has like a beginning, a middle, and an end. So where are you, right? Where are you in that tunnel? At some point, you're going to come out the other side. There's no infinite tunnels that I'm aware of, anyways. Another strategy that I like is to kind of zoom in and zoom out. I think of this as like if you're in nature and there's a stream and there's leaves kind of falling down from the trees and they're floating in the water, and maybe the water will like eddy in a spot, kind of swirl in a little circle, but then it will eventually continue, right? And the leaf will usually continue to go down the stream. So to me, I like this image because our emotions, as well as our thoughts, right? They will typically come and go. And depending on how close we are to them or how much we're focusing on them, they can kind of seem bigger. So, for example, if you're like leaning over the stream and you're staring at one leaf that's just kind of stuck going in a little circle, we're missing the whole forest, right? And we're also missing all the other leaves that are just kind of drifting by. So when emotion is particularly intense or uncomfortable, I really like to think of, okay, what is the larger picture right now? Can I step back? Maybe I need to get a support person to help me do that, to help me kind of take a step back. Maybe I need to practice a different kind of coping skill, like some deep breathing, or like go for a fast kind of walk, or maybe I need to kind of just take care of my physical health first. But then eventually I should be able to take that step back, see the larger picture, see the other leaves dropping by, drifting by in the stream, and get a little perspective on what's happening and what action is needed. Because I think sometimes we become so focused on one emotion that we can overlook all the others. So it is possible to have what seem like opposing emotions at the same time. For example, sometimes we have strong emotions of anger, but we might also have strong emotions of like love or seek, like that desire to connect with someone, even though we're very angry. Or we might have, feelings of fear along with feelings of joy, such as, some people are afraid of travel, right? Maybe there's some joy there about where they're going to get to go, but there's also some fear involved in getting there. And just by recognizing like the complexity and the presence of more than one emotion, we can really start to have like a more full picture of what's going on for us. And I feel like the more we can have a full picture, often the more prepared we are to just kind of move through it one step at a time. So I just wanted to say that, there are no bad or wrong emotions. Sometimes we respond to situations with emotions that are very surprising. And I think that by having a non-judgmental, like accepting stance, we can have greater insight into what's happening with us, and also then have more freedom in how we respond. Because for some people, for example, they've been told, oh no, you don't get to be angry. You can't express anger. But the problem with that is that anger can be very, very good information, such as, are we feeling trapped? Are we feeling powerless? Are we feeling like our goal is being blocked? This is very important information. A lot of times we get angry because we feel like we're going in circles, like we feel like we don't have enough power in a situation to achieve change. There are some really good books on anger, by the way, and I think that if the more we kind of like pay attention to these emotions and understand what it means to us, the more we can see how can we act effectively with them, and help them shift and change and come and go. so we don't feel stuck, and we also feel more comfortable when we're having the uncomfortable emotion, right? Because no matter how much work I do, I'm always going to have, anger come up from time to time, right? But the idea being that I'll see it as kind of being like an unwelcome visitor, perhaps. Like, oh, here you are. Great. What do I need to learn from you right now? Or, do I just simply need to kind of ignore you a little bit until you kind of go away? What's the situation? Do I need to distract myself a little bit? Or do I just need to acknowledge what's happening? We have a lot of tools that we can learn through therapy on how to work with emotion. These are just some of my favorites. If you have a favorite way that you like to work with emotion, or if something in this video stood out to you, I would love to hear it. Please leave it in the comments. If you'd like to support my work, liking or sharing this video, subscribing, all of that is super helpful to me, and I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening.